Good morning. Thank you all for being here. As Angela and I share a bit about Wicked and the theology that we can find in the books, the musical, and in the movies. You probably know me. I'm Adelyn Tyler-Williams. Some of you may or may not know my wife, Angela, who is here with us today. And as you can see, we each have our pink and green, respectively, because we love a theme. By way of prayer this morning, I want to share a quote from Gregory Maguire. I sometimes feel the Vatican says of the fringe members of the church, love it or leave it. I stay in the church because I must. Because it is the mystical body of Christ. It is the most palpable metaphor or nexus in which my frail human spirit and frailer body can know itself to be at home. In the church, when I take communion, I am joined by my dead father and my dead mother, by the unremembered relatives who passed their faith along through the centuries. I am joined by the children of my children, by everyone who cherishes the gospel of love and who strives, however inconsistently, to put others before oneself. And I deal with the pain, in part, by continuing to be Catholic as an act of defiance as well as an act of faith. And are they different things, even? Seems appropriate that we start with our credentials. Simply put, my credentials are that I've always been like this. So you'll see a very young Adelyn dressed as Glinda the Good Witch, and I would be remiss if I did not give a heartfelt thanks to my mom who sewed all of that tulle. And yes, but it's not close enough to your mouth.
Great, so I am the alpha in our relationship, and this is our very first Halloween couple costume together. We enjoyed seeing Wicked in the West End in London last year on our honeymoon, and we also just dressed as Alpha and Glinda for Halloween this year. So we are in this universe, we are in this fandom. We are excited to welcome you into this fandom with us.
This morning, we will be speaking about theodicy, what is theodicy, and the problem of evil. And we'll also look at some of the theological and philosophical themes that exist in the Wicked universe. Next week, we'll have a part 2 of this series, and we'll use some specific pieces of the text from the books and scenes from the musical and movies as material for theological reflection. In other words, we'll look at those pieces and wonder how God is present in them and how God is being revealed through those materials. We will do our best to minimize spoilers, knowing that some are less familiar with the Wicked universe. I do hope that you can see part 2 for good sometime this week, but if you haven't by next Sunday, we won't ruin it for you.
So we want to start by establishing our canon. In the Christian church, our canon is the Bible, the book for the Episcopalians in the room, which is most of you except for me probably. It is the Book of Common Prayer. And so for the purposes of this discussion, our core story that we're all of this stuff is building on top of is the book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum, that was published in 1900. It very quickly became a Broadway musical in 1902 with the show The Wizard of Oz. Some of you might have seen that show, you may have been in that show, you may have had children in that show. And then I think the biggest cultural point that will be familiar to most of us in the room is the film The Wizard of Oz that came out in 1939 with the ruby red slippers, all of that. And so the Wicked universe really starts with the book, Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West by Gregory Maguire, that was published in 1995. And he wanted to do a little bit of the backstory of who is that Wicked Witch of the West, and does she have a little bit more to her story? This became a full series. So The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West is book 1. The other 3 books in the series are Son of a Witch, A Lion Among Men, and Out of Oz. And then there are other sets of books and stories that are also building out of the Oz universe, but are not necessarily about our sort of Wizard of Oz originating characters. So Wicked, the Broadway musical, came into being in 2003 with Stephen Schwartz. And it is using the characters. It still happens in the same universe as Wicked the book, but the plot is definitely adapted. And now we get to experience the lovely adapted film feature of Wicked Part 1 that came out last year, and Wicked Part 2, For Good, that is coming out this Friday. So exciting.
It's also worth noting, for those who have not read the books are wild. So a lot of it gets sort of sanitized in the mass-produced musical and movies, and we'll say a little bit more about that as we go. But the first one, at least, is well worth a read. It's long, but they're quite wacky.
Miss Glinda, why does wickedness happen?
That's a good question. One many people find confusifying. Are people born wicked, or do they have wickedness thrust upon them? After all, the Wicked Witch had a childhood. Thus begins the musical and the movie.
So our central thesis of this is that the story of Wicked is trying to answer the question of theodicy. And if you have not heard that word before, don't worry. It's a big one that's just the question of evil. If we have a God who is all good and all powerful, then what do we do when bad things happen to good people? We see that there is evil and there is wickedness in the world, and so how do we square these things if we still hold to a God that is all true and all powerful, all good and all powerful? And it is a question that has been questioned for millennia, and so I will not be giving you an answer to this, but we are going to use this as our guiding theological question in this reflection. And theodicy, it is quite confusifying indeed. So let's orient ourselves to the world of Oz. If you recall from The Wizard of Oz, we have Glinda, the Good Witch of the North, in the pink. And so that is where you'll see Shiz is right above the Emerald City. So Shiz is the university where Elphaba and Glinda meet, and is in that northern part. Over here in the east is the Munchkin land. And so this is where the Munchkins are. This is where Dorothy lands in The Wizard of Oz. You will see that there's the yellow brick road going through. And then in the middle is that Emerald City, where the wizard is. It is all green. It is the center of power, of finances. It's the center of this world. And over to the west are the Vinkus, or Winky Country, if you have seen the movie and you remember our dear Fiyero. Winky Country. This is where Elphaba ends up, and she becomes the Wicked Witch of the West. Her sister, Nessa Rose, becomes the Wicked Witch of the East. And I don't want to say too much more, but you can put some pieces together and go watch the second movie if you don't know how that story ends. But that's sort of where we are and how we're situating ourselves and where people, these characters, find their homes and find places of power and ways that they interact with each other.
One might say that we are in the Emerald City of the U.S. More to say about that as we go along. I want to introduce you a bit to the religious life that takes place in Oz, and this is mostly in the books. This material doesn't get copied over into the musical and movies, but is a point of interest in the books. So unionism is the primary religion in Oz, and it's the closest thing to Christianity as we know it. It doesn't have a savior figure, but it follows an unnamed God that can't quite be described, but is certainly credited with many miraculous events. Many unionists try to fight against these more magical faiths, which are Lurlinism and pleasure faith. Lurlinism is a sort of paganism. They have a fairy queen, Lurline, and this provides many foundational myths for the people in Oz. The pleasure faith is a folk religion that prioritizes pleasure and enjoyment, and they have a high regard for spectacle. TikTokism is a traveling religion that follows the clock of the time dragon. So this image here is from the Gershwin Theater in New York, and this is their model of the time dragon clock. If you've seen the stage musical of Wicked, you may remember that there's often the set has a big dragon over top of it. That's the time dragon clock, which sort of orients all of the people in Oz to a particular sense of time. And this traveling clock would go around and reveal secrets about the past, present, and future, and at times caused a lot of controversy and consternation among the people. I'll say a bit more about unionism here because it has particular importance in the Wicked books. Frexbar Throp is Elphaba's father. In the movies and in the musical, we are introduced to Frexbar as the governor of Munchkinland, but in the books, he is a unionist missionary and minister. He's specifically fighting against the lures of the time dragon clock. He sees those who follow the time dragon as drunkards and as sort of making things up as they go along. Then the other two children of Frexbar carry on this faith. So Nessa Rose also has strong religious convictions. Shelthrop, Elphaba's brother, becomes the throne minister, and he both names religious values, but is also merciless in his war efforts. So here we see religious language as a way to assert power. We know nothing about that these days. Two places that are significant in unionism and significant in the books are the Chapel of St. Elphaba in Emerald City. This is their sort of cathedral. And the Cloister of St. Glinda, which is a montery, or what we would call a nunnery. A lot of action happens in those two places. Gregory Maguire has let us know that we are likely to learn more about Elphaba's religious childhood in his upcoming book, Elfie, A Wicked Childhood, which will come out in 2026. So we can be prepared to learn more about how Elphaba was built by this upbringing and somewhat complicated relationship with her father.
And maybe we'll have a part 3 next year.
So as I've named, a lot of these religious themes don't get copied over exactly into the musical and movies. And this is from a really great interview with Gregory Maguire for Religion News Service. And when asked about the way that spiritual themes are carried over, he says this: that same crisis between the impulse to be a citizen and care about society, and the impulse to be an individual and not anesthetize yourself away from your own individuality because it offends society does exist. I wouldn't say that this is only a religious impulse, but it's one of the things religion does. So even though the particular religious life in Oz is not carried over, some of those same struggles between individuality and society certainly carry on.
So now we get into the goody meat of both Wicked the musical and Wicked the movie. So we want to go a little bit more into the characters and what different themes we see represented in them. We'll start with my patron saint, Elphaba. She, as we've seen in the movie, if you have watched the first one, they do a lot more development of her childhood, showing her as a social outcast, the bullying that she experiences because of her skin color. Even though she is born into a governing family, that does not protect her from the cruelty and the judgment of people. And I think we know nothing about that here in our society. Her ambition starts at the beginning, in the Wizard and I, that she wants to go because she knows the wizard will grant her heart's desire, and she wants to not be green anymore. But as she gets closer to Dr. Dillamond and other people and learns about the struggles of other people in her community, she shifts that individual ambition to a more systemic, collective view of liberation. One piece we did not mention is the presence of animals, and that is capital A on purpose. There are different animals. There are animals who are non-sentient beings, and then there are animals, capital A, who can speak and teach and lead professional lives. And one of the main political themes of both the book and the musical and the movie is the suppression of those voices, the stripping away of rights, the making the animals out to be the enemy, to putting them in cages. Elphaba is shocked that how could you put a lion cub in a cage? Again, we have no idea what anything like that is like in our own life and times. But she builds this moral and ethical voice because of her relationship with Dr. Dillamond and learning more about the state of the animals. And she becomes wicked when she goes to meet the wizard and realizes that the wizard doesn't actually have power. And they invite her, they try to seduce her into a position of power, using her magic to control and suppress the animals. And it is only when she refuses to do what the Empire wants that she becomes named as wicked. I wonder if there are some themes that you know in the Christian story of particular people or prophets or Jesus refusing to go along with the empire, and then the consequences of those actions, and they can be really deadly. But Gregory Maguire is very clear that he does not write Elphaba as a Jesus figure. She is not the savior, but he writes her as that good Samaritan. So how can I lean towards the humanity of somebody who looks nothing like me, doesn't speak like me, doesn't behave like me, doesn't pray like me, and maybe even wishes my demise and destruction? What does my belief system require me to do, and where can I find the courage to do it? So that is a lot of Elphaba's story and her thread.
Next, we'll move over to Glinda, or Galinda, as she begins. Glinda is named as the Good Witch, but might invite us to ask what goodness is, what actually is moral. So she contributes to the question of theodicy, or answering that question, by inviting us to think about goodness and morality, what that really means. Glinda has a very individualistic view of things. Unlike Elphaba, her solidarity with the animals is actually still about herself. So this is how she moves from Galinda to Glinda. Dr. Dillamond is not able to say the G part of her name. So in solidarity with the animals who speak differently, she changes her name to Glinda.
It's important to note that Dr. Dillamond is a goat.
Yes, if you didn't know that part. The literal scapegoat in the situation. Glenda is also really concerned with her popularity, her status, her social connections, material things. When she arrives at Shiz, the university, she has trunks upon trunks of all of her pink clothing, which I will say I covet a bit, but she really does have this intense love of her things. She doesn't want to disrupt the things that are happening around her. She sort of goes along to get along. She is consistently complicit with the Empire and with the Wizard and Madame Morrible. She offers the appearance of goodness. She seems nice, she's very pretty. She offers so many of these things that our society can paint as good, but is not actually doing that many good works when we get down to it. She does have a complex character arc, as all of these characters do, but she really does invite us into some critical questions.
Then we get to start dancing through life with Fiyero, who is a prince from Leaking Country. He comes into Shiz University as the new kid on the block, and starts his song, "Oh, it seems I am the one who is to corrupt all of you yet again." He's moved from place to place to place for seemingly corrupting people toward all sorts of things. And his way of being through the world is just, I'm a prince, and I can go about doing things, and I can do whatever I want, and none of this really matters, so why not do what is pleasurable? Why not have fun? Why not go to the Ozdust ballroom where there are some illegal things happening, like chickens and goats and cows in the orchestra?
Scandalocious things.
Very scandalocious. But he has one of the biggest character arcs, I think, over the entire plot. I will not spoil that for you. But where we see him start to question in this first act, in the first movie, is that he's really shocked by Elphaba not coming under his charming spell. That she sees right through him, and she says, "You are just pretending. You're not actually happy. You're actually very empty." When there's a lion cub that they bring in the lion cub into the cage, and magically everyone falls asleep, but Elphaba and Fiyero are the only ones awake, and they take the lion cub and whisk it away into the forest. And he's like, "Why is this happening? Why did I not fall under your spell? But also, why am I here helping to do this?" And something changes within him, and he starts thinking. And it sticks with him, and we see at the end of part one that he's still thinking about that. He doesn't really know where to go, but he recognizes that once you've seen something, you can't unsee it. And so how does he move from his place of privilege and ambivalence to actually having moral conviction? And it'll be really interesting to see what are the steps that he takes with this new position, and where does he find himself within these power structures, and where will his alliances take him? I want to do a fun little thing. So my favorite thing is listening to Dancing Through Life and listening to the book of Ecclesiastes running through my brain. If you don't know this song, you should listen to it because it's great, even though it's like 9 minutes. This is his epitome of, I am just here to dance through life. I am here swaying and sweeping, always keeping cool. Life is fraughtless when you're thoughtless. Those who don't try never look foolish. Oh man, what a time. Mindless and careless, make sure you're aware lest trouble is rife. Woes are fleeting, blows are glancing when you're dancing through life. Dancing through life down at the Ozdust, if only because dust is what we come to. Nothing matters, but knowing nothing matters. It's just life, so keep dancing through. And so I want to thank Adelyn for pulling up this particular piece of Ecclesiastes for me. The book of Ecclesiastes is vanity, vanity, everything is vanities, everything under the sun is vanities. And it asks really big questions of, there is so much toil, but should we toil? What is good and what is wickedness? I was reading through it last night, and the good, wicked question is all in there. I want to highlight this part. There is a vanity that takes place on earth, that there are righteous people who get what the wicked deserve, and there are wicked people who get what the righteous deserve. This too, I say, is vanity. So I commend adjournment, for there is nothing better for people under the sun than to eat, to drink, and to be merry. Then joy will accompany them in their toil all the days of the life God has given them under the sun. Yes, eat, drink, and be merry does come from the Bible. You heard it here.
The final characters we'll look at today are the wizard and Madame Morrible. The wizard, who sort of spins off this whole universe of things. In Wizard of Oz, in the books, and in musical and movie for Wicked, in all of those places, the wizard is concealed behind this powerful facade. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. He has this concealed identity that gives an image of power, gives an image of real strength, but behind it, he is just a man. Madame Morrible seems really likable at first. She can be sort of a mothering figure, but then has a sinister side as we get to know her.
Madame Morrible didn't give away any of her character.
She also controls the weather. We'll see more about that as time goes on. Both the wizard and Madame Morrible create these literal scapegoats of the animals in Oz. So we named Dr. Dillamond and his story. There are scenes where the animals are getting together and talking about this problem that they are facing. They're being silenced, they're losing their ability to speak, or they're being disappeared. And all of this is happening in the name of progress. When Elphaba is invited to meet the wizard and then invited to do a spell from the Grimmery, she gives Chistery, one of the monkeys, the ability to fly. And she thinks that she's giving him a gift, but in time learns that Madame Morrible and the wizard are actually looking to have these monkeys become spies for the other animals. And this is when Elphaba is named as Wicked, because she questions these motives. She wants to undo this thing that is now causing Chistery pain because she has such a deep regard for the animals. She thought she was giving a gift, and in fact, she is doing something that has harmed these animals and is an instrument to cause further harm as time goes on. In the big concept of theodicy, the things that come up for the wizard and Madame Morrible are questions of how evil is made acceptable. How does hate become an acceptable narrative in society? Madame Morrible, because she's the one who names Elphaba as Wicked, she's a trusted leader, she is an academic, so when she calls Elphaba wicked, it sticks. And the evil that Elphaba has done is that only to question her powers, the powers of Madame Morrible and the wizard, and to question their motives.
So now we're going to take some time to hold space with the lyrics of Defying Gravity. If you don't know,
That's a funny
joke,
cultural
it's
reference.
a very funny internet culture,
Look it up.
millennial fancy joke. This is the closing of Act 1. It is one of the, when I heard it in London last summer, I just immediately started bawling. It is a song that has captured my generation for 20 years now, of being this powerful moment. So in the movie, Elphaba has seen the real shadow side of the Empire and realizes that she can't do that. And she leaves that offer for power from the wizard. But she realizes her own power, that she can read the Grimmery, which is the spell book in their culture, that they've lost the language. They've lost the ability to read this spell book, but she somehow has this gift. And she realizes that the wizard has no real power. He is afraid of the people and the animals coming together. He creates these systems of, at the beginning, there's a drought. There's a drought that causes all this scarcity that pits people against each other. And he manufactures this crisis and scapegoating the animals and trying to separate and divide and conquer people. But Elphaba doesn't grow up with that. We hear at the beginning, well, that's why we have a wizard, so that nothing bad ever happens. And then she realizes that this person that she believed in so much is actually the cause for the bad things that are happening. And it is scary, it is unmooring, but it is in that moment that she sees her own breakthrough. She recognizes that things have changed, that nothing can be the same, that she's not going to play by the rules of someone else's game, and she's going to close her eyes and leap, believing in her own power, in the power of the Grimoire, to enchant her broom and give her that power to fly, to defy gravity, and realizes that she can't stay where she is, and that she is going to have to be in a different place. They have marked her now as a dangerous, wicked witch, that all of Oz is going to be looking for her, and so she has to go, and we will see where on her journey she goes, where that takes her, what she learns, but it's that real growing up moment for her. And everyone that she thought was going to be there with her, she and Glinda have this moment of, you can come with me, and Glinda makes the decision to stay. So Elphaba goes alone, and we'll see how their friendship continues to be challenged and where they end up, and might be something happens for good in the end.
We have a couple of minutes for questions. I would invite folks who have questions to come up to this microphone, if you would. I'll bring us to you, Janet.
Comments, your own lore.
My question is, in The Wizard of Oz, there was a character named Dorothy who came from Kansas. Why isn't she mentioned?
That is a great question. So Wicked, the story, is the prequel, and we are mostly focusing on the plot of Act 1 of the prequel to The Wizard of Oz. In lieu of trying to give spoilers, Dorothy is going to show up and have very important pivotal markers in Part 2. So she is coming, but this is all what is happening before Dorothy arrives in Oz.
So at the very start of the musical, the whole thing kicks off by Glinda coming and naming that the Wicked Witch has been killed. Which we know happens because of Dorothy. And so that's named right at the start of the musical, that a young girl threw a bucket of water on the Wicked Witch. So that sort of kicks off the story and then leads us into this retrospective of how we got here.
And it's about partway through Part 2 that the timelines sync up, and so you get to see the Wizard of Oz story from the perspective of Elphaba, the Wicked Witch of the West.
Come on up, Elizabeth.
I'm a newcomer to the whole Wicked universe, but I just watched the movie for the first time. I was curious how the filmmakers intended it to land that Elphaba, under her green skin, is also an African-American woman, and how that's also landed, if that's part of the book, and if how that's landed with the fan base.
It's a fabulous question. That was a piece that we didn't get to this week. We might talk a little bit more about it, but Elphaba, the most iconic actors to play Elphaba are Idina Menzel. So Idina Menzel and Kristen Chenoweth were the originating Elphaba and Glinda in the Broadway show. And now we have Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande. And it was really important for Idina Menzel at that time to be a Jewish American actor playing that role, and the ways that anti-Semitism and scapegoating is a part of that. And Stephen Schwartz is also a Jewish American. He's the composer who wrote all the music. And so it was an important embodiment of what are these themes, and how can we, anyone who's experienced scapegoating and discrimination, that can be placed on this sort of green skin piece. In terms of Cynthia Erivo, it is so powerful and magical and representative to have her. She's not African American, she's British, a black British woman who is queer and who brought the fullness of her blackness into that while still honoring Margaret Hamilton, who's the actor who played the Wicked Witch of the West in the 1939 film. So it is intentional that she has a full set of nails, because there's a picture from a promotional poster where Margaret Hamilton is like this, and it's like claws coming out. And that there is, and in that, Margaret Hamilton also has a very defined nose, which is a part of anti-Jewish tropes of seeing the shape of your nose and the witchiness of that in anti-Semitic tropes that have happened for centuries. And so Cynthia Erivo is bringing that and has micro box braids in Elphaba and brings the blackness and brings that, because this is in a US-based context. So what are the things that we can learn? And this is the beauty of art and adaptations by different creators in different cultures, that we can see more than what is just on the page. We can see more than what is just on the screen. And I want to point out, for those of you who are watching that movie for the first time, there is a place where color theory comes in, and there is a pink light that shines on Cynthia Erivo's body. And so she's covered in green makeup, but when the pink and red light gets on her, she looks black. It looks like her skin. And that I see as a moment, and folks, other cultural critics have seen that as a way of like poking that truth of what is the experience of being a queer black woman in this society, poking through that character of Elphaba.
And that's during The Wizard and I. Right?
Yes, in the movie.
Towards the beginning.
The Wizard of I, and also What Is This Feeling? It happens again in the bed when she and Glinda are singing about loathing each other as roommates.
Can you come up here to the mic, please? That helps with our recording. Thank you.
I had a question about the different religious sects that you mentioned at the beginning. A lot of the theodicy seems like, I might be mistaken, it seems like it's coming from like a utilitarian and a secular perspective. I'm wondering, maybe from like the dominant unionist religious orthodoxy, is this counter to unionism or counter to the dominant religion, or is it in fact actual orthodoxy, what's going on with the mistreatment of the animals and mistreatment of other people?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and I think we can unpack that by looking at the way that Christianity is used in our own society, that there's a way to use these religions in favor of whatever you're trying to do. So I would argue that to acknowledge the miraculous nature of the unnamed God would be to respect the animals. But as I mentioned, Shel Throp, who becomes the throne minister, uses his religious understanding as a way to condone some huge violence, wiping out whole civilizations of people. So I think this is similar to some of the rhetoric that we see around religion as well. And these are some of the pieces where there's some nuance in the books that just, it takes too long to unpack in a musical and movies. I think we're getting some tastes of it with the movies being as long as they are. Not necessarily in this religious language, but a little more unpacking of things. But the book is long and has the opportunity to go into these religious ideas there are really clearly distinct cultures in Oz, as McGuire writes them, and he's able to speak a lot about the ways that these cultures come head to head, the way that these religious ideas come head to head. And this is where, like, the Monterey comes in, that there are ways that that's a safe haven. There's also ways that it's taken advantage of. So it's complicated, I guess, is the short answer. That I would argue it's not orthodoxy to create this harm, but there are certainly people who are articulating it in a way that defends their interests.
And I think it intentionally doesn't map one-to-one. There's a lot of interplay between the world of Oz and acknowledging that there is this world, but it's told from the perspective of the world of Oz. And so it is, they're like, is there another world out there? What is it? Is that an afterlife? Is that where the wizard came from? A couple of themes to note about these. So TikTokism is a newer religion that is very technologically focused. So the Clock of the Time Dragon is this creation that does plays and travels from place to place to place. There are machines, there are TikToks that are, which this is 1995, this has nothing to do with the app now, but there are machines that are like, it's giving me a lot of the AI revolution of like, there are machines that are now doing things that humans used to do, which I think is also relevant to the L. Frank Baum world of the Industrial Revolution. What are all these machines doing that's taking over human labor? But that it is a newer, mysterious thing. If unionism is the dominant, has been a colonizing religion in this place, Lurlanism still is there. So one of the main holidays in the book is Lurlan Mas. Might be like Christmas. But even in unionism, they still are talking about Lurlan Mas. And so what are the ways that the pagan roots and the folk pieces of that still persevere even when there is this colonizing dominant religion? There are places and there's still magic that happens and there's still folks looking for different herbs and spells. And how do those things persist and how do they all mix together in a way that is not neat?
It's also worth noting, just briefly, and then we'll close up, that Gregory McGuire grew up Catholic. He's also a gay man, so has a complicated relationship with the church, as that quote that I started with starts to name. So I think that's another reason that he's not doing a direct one-to-one with Christianity and unionism, but you can see the threads between the two worlds. In the spirit of defying gravity, I want to close us with one of my favorite blessings. May God grant you a holy foolishness to do all those things the world says can never be done. And the blessing of our Almighty God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, be with you now and remain with you always. Amen. Try to see for good this week, and we'll be back next week with more.